If I had known the Hale family's relaxing weekend getaway would become the moment all their secrets finally clawed their way to the surface, I might have pretended to have the flu, or food poisoning, or anything that allowed me to stay home. But Ethan, my husband, had looked so hopeful when he suggested it 2 weeks earlier. "My family wants to get to know you better," he'd said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "No pressure, no drama. Just a calm weekend by the water." It sounded sweet, almost convincing. But even then, something in his eyes flickered, a hesitation I should have paid more attention to. Because the truth was simpler than either of us wanted to admit. The Hale family didn't see me as one of them. Not really. Still, I said yes. I always said yes. Maybe out of optimism, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe because the hope of being accepted kept tugging on me like a child begging for attention. So that Friday morning, we packed up our bags and drove out to the lakeside villa his sister Sienna had rented. It was beautiful, all glass windows, rustic wood beams, and a wraparound deck that made the water look close enough to touch. The kind of place you'd expect to cleanse old wounds, not open new ones. We arrived first. Ethan unloaded the car while I carried in the snacks I'd brought. I always over-prepared: homemade banana bread, granola bars, sparkling water, things I hoped would come across as thoughtful rather than desperate. I wanted them to like me, and I hated how obvious that felt. Within an hour, the rest of the family showed up. Sienna and her husband Potter came in laughing, their baby strapped to Potter's chest. Charles, Ethan's father, followed behind them with a slow, measured walk. He looked tired, older than the last time I'd seen him. And then came Valerie. Her heels clicked on the wooden floor like she was entering a courtroom rather than a lakeside home. She scanned the room, landing on me last, offering a smile so tight it might have cracked if she'd held it a second longer. "Myra," she said, touching my arm lightly. "You look refreshed." It was one of her favorite ways to dismiss me. Short, sweet, and coated in condescension. "Good to see you too," I replied, forcing warmth. Ethan shot me a grateful smile, as if he could feel the tension already coiling between us. Everyone unpacked, claiming rooms and chatting. I tried joining conversations, offering to help with dinner, asking about work updates, but I felt like a piece of background furniture. Present, but not part of the scene. By late afternoon, Lucas arrived with his girlfriend, Tara. Unlike the others, Tara walked right up to me, hugged me, and whispered, "Finally, another normal person." I laughed harder than I meant to. It was the first moment that felt easy. Dinner should have been simple: grilled chicken, salad, roasted vegetables, nothing fancy. But Valerie had opinions about everything. "Myra, dear, maybe stick to setting the table," she said when I reached for the cutting board. "Let the more experienced cooks handle the food." I froze. Everyone heard it. Some glanced at me, others pretended they didn't. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mom, she can help." "Oh, of course she can," Valerie said lightly. "Just in ways she's comfortable with." My cheeks burned. Tara mouthed, "Wow," from across the counter. Still, the meal went on. Still, I tried to swallow the hurt quietly. But the real tension didn't start until the wine opened. Sienna poured everyone a second glass. Lucas cracked a joke. Potter teased him about something. Tara told a story about how she once got locked in her college gym. And then the conversation shifted, subtly at first. Sienna mentioned a family vacation they'd taken 2 years before Ethan and I started dating. "Oh my God," she said, laughing. "Remember the beach trip where Dad forgot the sunscreen and got burned like a lobster?" Everyone cracked up. Even Charles smiled. Then Lucas added, "And the Tahoe New Year's trip? The one where the pipes froze." More laughter. I listened quietly until Ethan leaned toward me and whispered, "That was the trip I told you about." Except he hadn't. "Not that one." I blinked. "I thought you said you skipped that year." He hesitated. "I did, I think." But his voice wasn't confident. Before I could question him, Valerie cut in, smiling sweetly. "Of course he didn't skip it," she said. "He came with us. He always comes with us." A cold, heavy feeling pressed into my stomach. I tried to keep smiling, but something wasn't adding up. Ethan had always told me he hadn't gone on a family trip for nearly 5 years before we met, said work had been too demanding, said he drifted from the family for a while. But everyone else seemed to remember something different. Tara raised an eyebrow at me, sensing my confusion. Sienna looked down at her wine. Potter suddenly found the wall very interesting. Only Valerie held my gaze. Something flickered in her eyes. Something sharp. Something knowing. I didn't say anything. But I didn't have to. The silence between Ethan and me said enough. We finished dinner. We cleaned up. We played cards. We pretended everything was normal. But the unease settled deeper with every passing hour. By midnight, when everyone drifted off to their rooms, I lay beside Ethan in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment again and again. "Why would your mom say that?" I whispered. Ethan exhaled shakily. "I don't know." But I knew he was lying. Because the tremor in his voice wasn't confusion. It was fear. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't true. And I could feel it. The start of a fracture. Hairline thin but stretching, growing, waiting for pressure to split everything open. The Hale family wasn't just hiding tension. They were hiding history. And before the weekend ended, it was going to come to the surface, whether they wanted it to or not. The next morning, a single overheard conversation in the kitchen exposes the first crack in Valerie's perfect facade and sets off the chain reaction that finally reveals what she's been hiding for years. The next morning began deceptively calm, the kind of calm that feels staged, manufactured, like someone had rehearsed a version of normal and handed everyone a script overnight. I woke up before Ethan, slipped out of bed quietly, and padded toward the kitchen, hoping to grab a cup of coffee before the day fully started. But halfway down the hall, I heard voices. Not just voices. Whispers. Specifically, Valerie's whisper. I stopped just before the doorway, my hand hovering above the frame. I shouldn't have listened. I told myself that twice. Then 3 times. But her tone was sharp and slicing, the kind of tone you don't ignore. "I told him not to bring her," Valerie hissed. My chest tightened. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. Sienna responded next, voice tired. "Mom, you can't control who they bring. It's their marriage." "Well, maybe it shouldn't be," Valerie snapped. My breath caught. A cold wave rushed through me, spreading from my stomach upward. My fingers curled against the doorframe as I leaned closer. Sienna exhaled. "Mom, stop." "No," Valerie said. "I mean it. Myra doesn't fit with us. She never has. She doesn't understand our family dynamic. She tries, Mom." "That's the problem," Valerie said, her voice dripping with something bitter. "Trying is not the same as belonging." I swallowed hard, throat burning. Sienna's chair scraped softly. "You've always been hard on her." "Because she makes Ethan weak," Valerie snapped. "Before her, he never questioned me. He never pulled away. Now he hides things. He lies. All because of her." A strange mixture of anger and sadness tangled in my chest. Before me, the coffee maker gurgled softly. Someone had left it running, and the smell drifted through the air, mocking the tension inside my ribcage. Sienna spoke again, quieter. "You didn't have to say that last night." "I absolutely did," Valerie insisted. "If I don't correct the story, it becomes the truth." "The truth about what?" Sienna asked. Valerie paused. "Too long. Long enough to make my pulse thrum." "You know what?" she said finally. Sienna didn't respond. I wondered if she didn't know or if she simply didn't want to admit she knew. Tara's footsteps approached then, light and slow. She sounded groggy. "I swear," she mumbled, "this house makes the loudest floors." Then she stopped. "Oh," Tara said, her voice sharpening. "Morning. Drama already." Sienna sighed. "It's not drama." "It's exactly drama," Tara cut in. "And before anyone starts, Myra heard enough yesterday. She's not oblivious." Valerie scoffed. She wasn't supposed to be part of that conversation. "Maybe," Tara said. "She should have been." I almost smiled. Tara was the only one in this family who didn't shrink under Valerie's gaze. But Valerie fired back immediately. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Tara said. "You're not married into us." "Yet," Tara corrected. "And honestly, Statements like that make me think twice. I pressed a hand against my mouth to stop a shocked laugh from escaping. Valerie was quiet for a moment, probably stunned. Finally, she said, "I just want what's best for my son." Tara responded with a coldness I had only heard once before, the night she stood up to a rude waiter at a restaurant. "Then maybe try trusting him," she said. "Because right now, you're treating him like a puppet whose strings you own." A chair moved abruptly, Valerie standing. "Probably. This is none of your concern." "Everything becomes my concern if you're sabotaging your own son's marriage," Tara said. My heart pounded. Not because Tara was wrong, but because she was the only person willing to say it out loud. Sienna whispered, "Please, keep your voices down." But Valerie ignored her. "Sabotaging," she scoffed. "I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm protecting him." "From what?" Tara asked sharply. Silence. Then, a whisper filled with venom. "From the consequences of choosing the wrong person." I squeezed my eyes shut, while rising. That was enough. More than enough. I stepped into the kitchen. 3 heads whipped toward me. Tara's eyes widened instantly, her face tightening with sympathy. Sienna froze, guilt flooding her expression. Valerie straightened her shoulders, replacing any flicker of surprise with her usual frosty calm. "Good morning, Myra," she said softly. Sweetly. Too sweetly. "Sleep well." Tara stared at her like she'd sprouted horns. I walked straight to the counter, keeping my voice steady. "I heard everything." Sienna winced. Tara muttered, "Good." Valerie didn't flinch. Of course she didn't. "You shouldn't eavesdrop," she said. I turned toward her slowly. "You shouldn't talk about your son's wife like I'm dirt." Sienna's eyes darted to the doorway, probably hoping Ethan would appear and save us from the collision she could feel coming. But Valerie stepped closer, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "I'm being honest," she said. "You and Ethan are mismatched." "Because I'm not afraid of you?" I asked. Tara choked back a laugh. Valerie ignored it. "Because you pull him away from the family." I blinked. "Or maybe he pulls away because he's tired of being controlled." Sienna whispered, "Please don't." "No," Tara said immediately. "Say it. Someone has to." Valerie's jaw clenched. "You know nothing about this family." "I know enough to see what's happening," I said. "He doesn't tell me things because he's afraid of how you react." "Not me." She paused, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked startled. A small crack, tiny, but visible. Before she could speak, Ethan entered the kitchen rubbing his eyes, his hair still messy from sleep. "What's going on?" he asked, voice groggy. No one moved. No one breathed. Valerie looked at me, then at Ethan, then at me again, recalculating, recalibrating, rearranging her facade. "Just a discussion," she said. "Your wife overheard something she misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand anything," I said quietly. Valerie's eyes snapped toward me like a warning shot. But Ethan stepped closer to me, his hand brushing mine, a subtle gesture, but enough to tell her he wasn't fully on her side this time. "What did she overhear?" he asked. Valerie stiffened. Sienna looked panicked. Tara looked thrilled. And I looked at Ethan, really looked, wondering how much truth he was finally ready to hear from his own mother's mouth. Because this moment wasn't about breakfast. It was about everything she'd hidden, everything he'd avoided, everything I'd been forced to feel alone. And it was only the beginning. Ethan demands answers, but the truth Valerie gives him is only half of the story. And when Lucas accidentally reveals the missing half later that afternoon, the entire Hale family fractures in a way none of them can undo. Ethan blinked at the 3 of us, his mother stiff as marble, Sienna pale and uncomfortable, and Tara leaning against the counter like she was watching the preview of a very interesting movie. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Someone please tell me what's going on." Valerie spoke first, because of course she did. "Myra overheard a private discussion and took it the wrong way," she said, her tone clipped and rehearsed. "That's all." Tara let out a quiet scoff. I didn't say anything yet. I wanted Ethan to ask the right question, the question he had avoided his entire life. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at me nervously. "What did you hear?" Valerie's eyes narrowed, warning him not to dig. Tara's eyebrows rose, daring him to. My throat tightened. I chose my words carefully. I heard your mother say she never wanted me here, I said, and that she thinks our marriage was a mistake. Ethan froze. Sienna closed her eyes. Tara muttered, "There it is." Valerie's voice sliced through the silence. "That is not what I said." "That is exactly what you said," Tara shot back. Word for word. Valerie glared at her. "You are a guest in this house. And you're a tyrant in it," Tara replied calmly. Sienna nearly fainted. But Ethan didn't react to Tara, or to me, or even to his mother's hostility. He just stood there, processing, staring at the tile like it held the answer to all the questions he'd been afraid to ask. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Mom, why would you say that?" A small shock moved across Valerie's face, brief but real, as if she wasn't expecting him to question her. Ever. She straightened. "I said what any mother would say." "No," Ethan said quietly. "No, you didn't." Valerie took a breath, gathering her composure. "Ethan, sweetheart, I worry. About you. About your choices. About the life you're building." I stepped back slightly, watching her fold guilt and concern into one neat package. She continued, "I just want the best for you. Is that so terrible?" Tara whispered, "Manipulation, level expert." Sienna nudged her, mortified. "Please don't." But Ethan wasn't distracted. "Mom, that's not what you said. You told Sienna I never should have brought Myra." The silence that followed was heavy, sticky, like someone had poured thick syrup over the room. Valerie didn't deny it. That, in itself, was an admission. Instead, she shifted the blame with surgical precision. "Your wife overheard an incomplete conversation and assumed the worst." I shook my head slowly. "No, I heard exactly what you meant." Her eyes flashed. "You heard what you wanted to hear." "No," Ethan said, stepping between us. "She heard what you said. Why would you talk about her like that?" Valerie's jaw tightened. "Because I see things you don't." "Like what?" Ethan asked. At that, Valerie hesitated. Just for a second. Tara noticed instantly. "Oh, she's hiding something." Sienna finally found her voice. "Mom, just tell him." Valerie's nostrils flared. "Tell him what?" "That thing," Sienna said quietly. "The thing you said last night." My stomach dropped. "What thing?" I asked. But Valerie's gaze snapped to Sienna, warning her to shut up. Sienna paled. Tara stepped in front of her protectively. "If she won't say it, Lucas will." We all looked toward the hallway, and there he was. Lucas stood barefoot, hair messy, expression sharp. He'd clearly heard more than anyone expected him to. "Morning," he said casually. "Oh, should I say, welcome to the Hale annual meltdown." Valerie glared at him. "This does not concern you." Lucas grinned. "Oh, it concerns all of us. Especially since you lied to everyone for years." The room went still. Sienna whispered, "Lucas, don't." "No," he said, walking fully into the kitchen. "It's time." He looked at Ethan first. Not at me, not at their mother, but at his older brother, eyes burning with something like betrayal. "Do you remember the year you stopped coming to family trips?" Ethan frowned. "What are you talking about? I didn't stop coming." Lucas laughed. Bitter, wounded, tired. "Yeah, because Mom told us you didn't want to come." My pulse kicked. Lucas continued. "She said you were too busy, too stressed, that you needed space, that you preferred to spend holidays alone. That's what she told me." Ethan said. "Right," Lucas said. "She told each of us something different." Valerie's voice cracked like a whip. "Lucas, enough." But Lucas didn't stop. "She told Dad that you were pulling away from the family. She told Sienna that you needed time to fix your life. She told me that you didn't want to be around us anymore." I looked at Ethan, really looked, and watched something inside him crumble. He whispered, "I never said that. Ever. Why would you tell them that?" Valerie's mask faltered. "Just a fraction. But enough." Ethan's voice rose. "Why would you make everyone think I didn't want them?" Valerie's eyes watered suddenly, a weapon she'd wielded all her life. Because you were slipping away from me. Lucas stepped forward. You pushed him away. And then blamed us. And then blamed him. And now you're doing the same thing to Myra. Valerie's voice cracked. I did what I had to do. No, Lucas said. You did what made you feel in control. The room trembled with truth. Finally, Ethan turned to me, his eyes a mixture of apology, realization, and something else. Resolve. But before he could speak, Charles shuffled into the kitchen. Silent, tired, observant. He had heard enough. His presence changed the air immediately. He looked at Valerie with a pain I didn't understand yet. A pain older than any argument. A pain shaped by years of something unspoken. And then he said quietly, Tell them the real reason, Valerie. She froze. Sienna covered her mouth. Lucas stood straighter. Tara whispered, Oh, hell. My stomach twisted. The real reason. Valerie stared at her husband as if he'd betrayed her. Don't you dare. But Charles stepped forward, his voice firmer than I'd heard it in years. They deserve the truth. Especially Ethan. The kitchen buzzed with tension, every breath shallow, every heartbeat loud. Charles looked around at each of us, then at Valerie. Tell them, he said. Tell our children why you needed Ethan to stay away. Tell them what you've been hiding since the night everything fell apart. Valerie's face went ghost white, and that was when I realized. Whatever she'd done, whatever she'd hidden, whatever had fractured this family long before I arrived, it was big, bigger than hurt feelings, bigger than favoritism, bigger than control. And it was finally about to explode. Charles reveals the truth Valerie has buried for years, a truth that reshapes Ethan's entire childhood, shatters Valerie's image of perfection, and forces the family to confront the night that changed everything. For a long moment, no one moved. Charles's words hovered in the kitchen like smoke trapped inside a room with no open windows, thick enough to choke on. Valerie's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked less like the commanding matriarch who controlled every whisper and every memory, and more like someone who had been cornered by her own past. Charles, she said finally, her voice trembling, don't do this. Not here. Not now. But Charles shook his head. Now is exactly when it needs to happen. Ethan's voice cracked. Dad, what is he talking about? Charles exhaled deeply, a tired man carrying a decades-old burden. You deserve the truth, son. All of you do. I could feel the air shift, everyone leaning closer, bracing themselves. Valerie put her hand on the counter to steady herself. It was the first time I had ever seen her physically unsettled. Don't, she whispered sharply. You promised. Lucas's eyes widened. Promised about what? Sienna whispered. Mom, we can't keep pretending. But Valerie wasn't listening. She stared at Charles with pure fear. Not anger. Fear. That alone told me everything. This secret was not small. Not petty. Not a misunderstanding or overreaction. Whatever this was, it had teeth. Charles finally turned toward Ethan fully. You always wondered why you stopped coming on family trips when you were 16. Ethan blinked rapidly. I assumed I didn't want to. No, Charles said. You were never the one who chose that. Your mother did. Valerie let out a rattled, enough. But Charles kept going, voice steady. Your mother decided you should stay home because she didn't trust you to be around me. Silence cracked across the room like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Ethan stared at him. What? Why wouldn't she trust me with you? Charles swallowed, pain tightening his features. Because she believed I had failed you. My stomach twisted. Failed him? How? Ethan shook his head. Failed me how? You were always a good dad. Valerie suddenly slammed her palm on the counter. Everyone jumped. Charles, she hissed. Stop. He didn't. He looked right at Ethan, voice low but clear. Your mother blamed me for the night she lost trust. The night everything in our marriage shifted. Valerie's breath hitched. Please. Sienna whispered. Dad, if you don't say it, I will. Valerie whipped around. Sienna. But Sienna's eyes filled with tears. I remember, she said weakly. Bits of it, at least. Lucas turned toward her sharply. You never said anything. I didn't understand, she whispered. Not until years later. Ethan's voice was barely audible. What happened? Someone tell me. Charles closed his eyes briefly, gathering the strength to rip open a wound he'd stitched shut decades ago. It was New Year's Eve, he said. You were 16. Lucas was 13. Sienna was 10. Your mother and I had an argument. Loud, messy, stupid. You heard us, and you came downstairs. Valerie's hand covered her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Stop. But Charles didn't. You stood between us, he continued, voice breaking. You tried to protect your mom. Lucas's jaw dropped. What? Ethan. Ethan looked stunned. I don't remember that. You do, Charles said softly. You just buried it. You stood in front of your mother and yelled at me to leave her alone. My breath caught. This didn't sound like the man I knew. But then again, trauma rearranges memories. I wasn't hurting her, Charles said desperately. I never laid a hand on her. But she was crying, and you panicked. You grabbed her arm and told her you'd keep her safe. Valerie sobbed quietly. And then, Charles said with a cracked voice, you pushed me. Ethan's head snapped back as if someone had struck him. What? You pushed me away from her, Charles said. You were angry. You were scared. You weren't yourself. Sienna covered her mouth. Lucas stared at the floor. Charles continued. I stumbled backward, hit the edge of the counter, and fell. Hard. You thought you'd seriously hurt me. You were hysterical. He wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. But instead of comforting you, your mother blamed me. Valerie's voice was a whisper. You scared him. I didn't scare him, Charles said, turning to her. You scared him. You made him believe he was responsible for protecting you from me, even though I never touched you. The room spun slightly. This was darker than I expected. More twisted. More complicated. Valerie stepped forward, tears falling. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Lucas asked softly. Valerie shook her head slowly, like she couldn't say it. Charles answered for her. Afraid of losing control, he said. Afraid the kids would stop seeing you as the victim and start seeing the truth, that you used their love to manipulate every situation. Valerie broke. That's not true. That's not. It is, Charles said gently. And after that night, you told Ethan he hurt me. You told him he needed to stay home. That he wasn't emotionally stable. That he needed you. Only you. My heart dropped, heavy and aching. You made him believe he pulled away, Charles added. You took away his choice, his autonomy, his memories. Ethan's face crumpled. I didn't remember any of this, he whispered. Mom, why? Valerie sobbed harder. I was terrified. You were slipping away. All of you were. And I didn't know how to keep the family together. Lucas whispered harshly. So you tore it apart. Sienna cried quietly, leaning into Potter's chest. Ethan was shaking. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? Valerie sank into a chair, her entire body trembling. Because, she whispered, I was afraid you'd hate me. Ethan stared at her, grief and betrayal swirling in his eyes. I don't hate you, he said softly. But I don't know who you are anymore. The room quieted. Pain hung heavy in the air. No one looked at me, but I could feel the shift. Because if Valerie had manipulated Ethan before, had rewritten his memories, had controlled the narrative for decades, then everything she'd done to me wasn't personal. It was patterned, practiced, a cycle. And Ethan was finally seeing it. But what none of us realized yet was this. The real fallout hadn't even begun. Because the next revelation, the one coming later that night, wouldn't just break Valerie's control. It would force Ethan to choose a side. And that choice would change our marriage forever. When Ethan disappears for hours after this confrontation, everyone assumes he's taking space. But what he brings back with him isn't clarity, it's evidence. Evidence that exposes the final life Valerie built her entire image on. After the explosion in the kitchen, the Hale family scattered like a flock of startled birds. Sienna took her baby into the nursery. Lucas stormed outside. Tara followed him, muttering something about deep breaths and not punching walls. Valerie stayed frozen at the table, trembling quietly, her eyes hollow, as if the memories she'd spent years burying were clawing their way back to the surface. And Ethan walked out. No coat, no shoes, just walked. I followed him to the doorway and watched him disappear down the tree-lined driveway behind the villa. I didn't call out. I didn't chase him. Something in his posture told me this wasn't a moment to fix. This was a moment he needed to unravel on his own. Hours passed. At first, we all assumed he was clearing his head. Then 1 hour became 2. 2 became 3. The sky dimmed into early evening, and the house felt like it was waiting for a storm that hadn't arrived yet. Lucas hovered by the window, pacing. He should have been back by now. Sienna wrung her hands. Maybe he went to town. Porter shook his head. He doesn't know this area well enough to go wandering. Valerie, still seated at the table, whispered into her trembling hands, I didn't mean for this. I didn't want this. But no one responded, because regardless of what she meant, the damage was done. Tara stepped toward me gently. Myra, if you're worried, I'll drive around and look for him. Before I could answer, headlights cut across the living room window. Ethan's car. Lucas exhaled loudly. Finally! But something felt off before Ethan even stepped inside. I could sense it. Something in the way the car door shut, slow, gentle, almost ceremonial. Something in the way he approached the house, not hurried, not apologetic, not shaken. Resolved. The front door opened. He stepped in, colder and quieter than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were red, but not from crying, from exhaustion, from thinking, from realizing. In his hand was a manila folder. Everyone froze. Valerie's breath hitched. Ethan, what is that? He didn't answer her. He walked past us, past Tara, past Lucas, past Sienna, and sat at the same kitchen table where the confrontation had happened that morning. Then he looked at his mother. Sit, he said. It wasn't a yell. It wasn't a request. It was the first time I'd heard him speak to her with authority, not fear. Valerie sat slowly, hands trembling. Ethan placed the folder on the table and nudged it toward her only an inch. Then he looked around the room. This, he said softly, is everything I didn't remember. No one spoke. He opened the folder. Inside were papers, old printouts, handwritten notes, a few photos, and something heavier, a recording device. My breath caught. What is all that? Lucas asked cautiously. Ethan took a long breath. I went to the storage unit. Sienna gasped. Dad's storage unit. Charles closed his eyes. Ethan, you didn't have to. Yes, Ethan said, voice sharp. I did. That unit had been closed for years, locked up, untouched, forgotten. Valerie had insisted it was just old junk, things no one needed to revisit. Turns out, she was lying. Ethan continued, quieter this time. Dad kept everything from that night. Everything you tried to hide. Valerie's face drained of every drop of color. I didn't hide anything. Ethan flipped the first sheet over. A police report. Not filed, but written by an officer who had been called to the house that night. Not because Charles hit her, but because the neighbors heard screaming. I don't remember police, Ethan whispered. Why don't I remember the police? Valerie whispered. I told them to leave. It wasn't there. I was 16, he said, voice cracking. I had a panic attack so bad I collapsed. They wanted to take me to the hospital. Why didn't I go? Valerie's shoulders shook. Because they would have asked questions. Questions that would have made everything worse. Lucas stepped forward, fury blooming across his face. Questions like why a 16-year-old kid thought he needed to protect his mother from a father who wasn't even hurting her. Valerie covered her face. Ethan didn't stop. He pulled out a small, battered notebook. Dad wrote down what happened, he said. Every detail. Every conversation. Every lie you told us afterward. Sienna began crying softly. Ethan flipped through the pages, not reading, just absorbing the weight of them. Then he pulled out something else from the folder. A flash drive. My therapist told me years ago to trust my instincts, Ethan said. Today, I did. I listened to my gut and went to Dad's storage unit. He clicked the flash drive in his hand. It has audio. Valerie shook her head violently. No. No. Ethan, don't play that. Please. Charles's voice was quiet. Let him. Tara whispered, There's audio. Ethan nodded. Dad recorded their argument. Not intentionally. It was on because he was recording a voicemail earlier, and it kept running. He didn't realize it until after. My hands tightened at my sides. This wasn't just memory. This wasn't just trauma. This was evidence. Ethan looked at his mother. Mom, you told me I attacked Dad. Valerie sobbed. You pushed him. I pushed him because you screamed I needed to protect you, he said. I pushed him because I thought he was hurting you. His voice cracked. But you were the one hurting. The room felt too small for the truth. Too suffocating. Too real. Ethan took another breath. Steadier this time. I listened to the recording. Everyone froze. And the truth is, I didn't scream because I was scared of Dad. His eyes burned into his mother. I screamed because I was terrified of you. Valerie collapsed into tears. Sienna sobbed openly. Lucas cursed under his breath. Tara whispered, Oh my God, over and over. Charles stood still, grief carved into every line of his body. Ethan turned toward me, and the look in his eyes was the look of a man whose entire childhood had been rewritten in one afternoon. Myra, he said softly, I know now why you never felt safe in this family. I swallowed hard. Ethan. I couldn't see the pattern, he whispered. But now I do. And I won't let it continue. What he said next would shatter everything Valerie thought she still controlled. And it would change the course of our marriage in a way none of us were prepared for. Ethan confronts Valerie with the recording, and the decision he makes afterward forces the entire Hale family to choose sides. But the choice he asks me to make will determine whether this marriage survives the fallout. Valerie didn't just cry. She folded in on herself, shoulders caving, hands covering her mouth, shaking like someone had pulled the floor out from beneath her. But the rest of us weren't focused on her collapse. All eyes were on Ethan. He stood at the head of the table with a flash drive in his hand, a simple silver rectangle that might as well have been a detonator. The kind you don't press unless you're ready for everything to fall apart. Play it, Lucas said quietly. Sienna whispered. Lucas. No, Ethan said. I already listened. You don't need to hear it. I do. He sat slowly, like every muscle was resisting gravity, like his body wanted to keep holding everything up even though his mind no longer could. And then, with a deep breath, he pushed the flash drive across the table toward Valerie. This isn't my burden anymore, he said. It's yours. No one moved. Not Lucas. Not Sienna. Not Charles. Not me. The silence was sharp enough to hear breath hitch, sharp enough to feel the tension vibrate through the floorboards. Valerie stared at the small object as if it might burn her hands. Finally, she whispered, Ethan. I was afraid. He stared at her, hollow. Of him. Yes, she said too quickly, almost desperately. Of Charles. Of what he'd do if. Stop lying, Ethan snapped. I've heard your voice on that recording. Valerie's lips trembled. I heard you screaming at him, not for help. I heard you telling Dad he ruined your life. His hands curled into fists. I heard you threaten to leave with us. I heard you throw things. I heard the slap. Sienna gasped softly. Lucas closed his eyes. Charles shuddered. And then, Ethan whispered, I heard myself yelling, Mom, stop. Not Dad, stop. Not his hurting you. He swallowed, hard. I was trying to pull you away. Valerie's sobs turned frantic. I wasn't in my right mind, Ethan. I was overwhelmed. I was scared. Scared of what? Ethan demanded. Scared of being caught. Scared of losing control. Scared that your sons might finally see you for who you are. The words hit like glass shattering. Everyone flinched. Everyone except Valerie. She was too busy crumbling. You don't understand what marriage was like back then, she choked out. What was expected of us? I was drowning. Nobody helped me. Dad tried, Ethan said. His voice shook with a painful kind of grief. That notebook proves it. The messages prove it. The officer's report proves it. He tried to keep this family from falling apart, and you punished him for it. Charles blinked rapidly, tears pooling in his eyes. But the worst part, Ethan whispered, is that you let me think I was the monster. You let me carry that for years. Valerie sobbed harder. Myra told me you used to compare her to your own mother, he continued. Control her through guilt and expectation. The same way you did to Dad. The same way you did to me. Myra, Valerie croaked, turning toward me as if searching for an ally. Honey, I never meant to be cruel. Do not, Ethan barked, use that tone with her. She flinched. I stepped back, not wanting to be anywhere near the crossfire. Ethan leaned forward. This ends today, he said. I'm drawing a boundary, and you're not going to like it. Lucas and Sienna exchanged a look. Charles pressed trembling fingers to his temple as if bracing for an earthquake. Valerie whispered, Please, Ethan, don't do this. But he continued anyway. Mom, I'm going no contact with you. Her eyes widened in horror. No, no. Ethan, don't you dare. You don't get to manipulate this, he said sharply. You don't get to use tears or fear or guilt anymore. I'm done letting you twist every truth into something convenient. Valerie clutched the table like she needed it to breathe. You're choosing her, she choked out. No, Ethan said. I'm choosing me. Choosing who I want to be. Choosing the family I want to build. His voice softened at the end. Barely, but enough that I felt it in my chest. He wasn't doing this out of anger. He was doing it out of self-preservation. You need help, Mom, he said gently. Real help. Not the kind you pretend to do for show. Therapy, accountability, consequences. You need all of that. But I can't be the one holding your hand through it. You'd abandon your own mother, she cried. You abandoned me a long time ago, he whispered. The room went dead still. Lucas put a hand on the back of a chair to steady himself. Sienna covered her mouth. Charles stayed at the table like he was watching every regret in his life replay at once. Valerie's sobs turned into hyperventilated gasps. She looked at me suddenly, desperately. Myra, please. Help me. Tell him he doesn't mean this. I felt Ethan's eyes on me. Heavy. Searching. Waiting. Myra, he said softly. I'm not forcing you to choose a side. But his voice trembled the tiniest bit, like he feared the answer anyway. This family is broken, he said. I'm trying to stop it from breaking us too. I need you with me on this, but I won't pressure you. Everyone looked at me. Me. The outsider. The newcomer. The one who'd walked into this household not knowing the rot underneath the wallpaper. Valerie whispered, Please, Myra. You know I love you. You know I never meant harm. But Ethan's voice cut through hers. You don't owe her anything, he said. You owe yourself safety. You owe us a chance to build something healthier. My heart raced. Because this wasn't just a moment. This was a fracture line. Whichever way I leaned, everything would change. I inhaled, exhaled, and prepared to speak. But before I could get a word out, a fist slammed against the front door. Everyone jumped. The pounding continued, urgent, frantic. Then a voice shouted from outside. Open the door. I have information about the night of the accident, and Valerie needs to hear it now. Lucas rushed toward the foyer. Sienna froze. Valerie went ghost white. Ethan looked at me, eyes steady, jaw tight. Myra, whatever is on the other side of that door, it might just decide the rest of our future. The person behind the door isn't a stranger, and what they reveal will force the family to confront a truth darker than anything Valerie admitted. And the choice I make next will determine not only Ethan's future, but mine. The pounding at the door didn't stop. My heart slammed against my ribs. Lucas yanked the door open, and a man, mid-30s, disheveled, eyes wide with urgency, stumbled inside. I need to speak to Valerie. Now, he said, voice taut with fear. It's about the night of the accident. Everything you think you know is wrong. Valerie froze, hands clutching the edge of the table. Who are you? She whispered, trembling. The man looked at her, not with anger, not with malice, but with a weight that made the air crackle. I worked with your husband the night it happened. I saw things that change everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. What do you mean? The man's gaze swept the room, landing finally on me. You need to hear this first, Myra. Because the choice you make now will decide who walks away and who stays buried in lies. Valerie's lips quivered. I don't understand. Lucas stepped back, giving the man room. Sienna clutched her chest, unable to look away. Charles' hand shook as he pressed it against his temple, like bracing for the inevitable. I swallowed hard. The weight of Ethan's stare on me made my throat dry. He wasn't asking. He was trusting me to see the truth. The man took a deep breath. The truth about that night, it's worse than anyone realizes. And Valerie, you need to hear it before you can say anything else. Valerie's face went pale, almost ghostly. Her sobs had vanished, replaced by a rigid, fragile silence. I felt the air thicken, the room shrinking around us. Every eye was on us, on me. The man reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, thick with documents and photographs. He slid it across the table toward Valerie. This is everything, he said. And Myra, what you do next will either save them or destroy them all. Valerie's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. Her eyes darted to Ethan, pleading silently. He shook his head slightly, almost imperceptibly. I won't stop you, Mum. But I won't step back either. This is your reckoning. I hesitated, heart hammering, fingers brushing the envelope. And then, before I could make a move, Valerie gasped, her eyes widening in horror. She looked at me, voice cracking. Myra, you have to see this. Every instinct screamed at me to look. But I knew, once I did, nothing would ever be the same. The envelope holds secrets no one in this family was ready for. When Myra opens it, the truth about the accident and Valerie's role will shatter everything. Who survives the fallout, and who pays the price?